Hey everyone, Tables here again. Welcome back to part 4 of my Bravely Second Jobs tier list. This is the mid tier, so we're getting onto the jobs now that are generally pretty solid. You'll probably see use in most playthroughs. This is actually my kind of second version of this tier. I've only changed one job, and that was the job I had in 12th, which was Catmancer. Many people have pointed out that Catmancer's actually got some really strong things it can do, and I did point these out in the video, and then I sort of didn't really think to myself how good they actually are. But yeah, Catmancer does some incredible things and will be appearing higher up than this part in the list. So with that said, if you have watched my part 4 before, you don't need to watch any more of this, you'll know everything I'm going to say. If you haven't, I hope you continue watching and enjoy it. Okay, so starting things off, we have rank 16, White Mage. Some people might be a bit surprised at how high this one is. Because a lot of people think, it's just worse than Bishop. Why would you ever bother using it? Well, there's two things here I'd consider. Firstly, just because it's worse than Bishop, it doesn't mean that it's bad. White Mage is actually still really good, and it can heal very effectively still. So just because something else does the job better, White Mage can still do that healing job. And secondly, there are a lot of things actually that White Mage does better than Bishop. The most notable of which I'd say is sort of mid to late game healing. White Mage with Curaga heals a whole group a lot more effectively than a Bishop does with Benediction. The reason for that is that when group cast on 4 targets, magic has 40% of the normal power. That means Benediction is 40% healing to a group. White Mage's Curaga, on the other hand, it turns out it's actually 20 times mind when you're casting it on a group. And that's actually high enough. You can easily be healing 60-70% max HP. So anyway, let's have a look at things in a bit more detail. In terms of stats, White Mage is a bit like Time Mage and Black Mage. It's not really anything too special. Obviously, it's got that big mind boost because it's using mind for healing, and S rank staves to go along with it. It does have B rank rods and decent intelligence and magic scaling, and that means it can be quite good at magic offense as well, if you want to go down that line. And in fact, actually, a lot of the time I find I tend to use offensive magic with my White Mage, because you don't usually need a staff when you're using White Magic healing, because there's other ways of boosting your mind. But if you want to go for a staff and get even better healing, you can also do that as well. In terms of its job command, obviously that's the White Magic, which is mostly healing. It does also give you the Aero line of spells. The early level spells are not that great. Again, it's a bit like with Time Mage last time. They are slightly better because you do get this earlier in the game. So Cure, Cura, Curado are all pretty useful still. And you can still make use of Aero and Aero over Hammer at this point in the game. You also of course get Raise, Suna, Sunaga, which is reviving, clearing statuses. And they're quite useful, especially when combined with Spellcraft to make target a whole group. At the high levels, you start getting Curaga, as I mentioned before, a Rise, which fully heals someone and revives them, Holy as well, which is very powerful. It's the strongest single target spell in the game, I think. Yeah, 110 power, 6 times damage scaling, which is very, very good. And once you hit level 11 and get Razel, well, thing is, like, Spellcraft sort of does that already, so it's not that amazing. But if you're not using Spellcraft for some reason, yeah, Razel can be nice. The job does also provide one or two quite nice support abilities, the probably most notable of which is Angelic Ward. Not only is it a really good support ability, because like 50% chance of halving damage easily keeps you alive an extra hit or two, so it's a great way of sort of filling in extra space you've got to give you a good chance of surviving a bit longer. But that's also available at level 2, so if you take White Mage from the first side quest in chapter 2, get up to level 2 on everyone, you've got a powerful support ability you can use on anyone with very little investment needed, and that can be really useful. As you get to slightly higher levels, you get Silence Immunity, which can be quite nice on a healer, so kind of well placed getting it on White Mage. And also Group Cast Master, which can be very nice with or healing magic actually, in general. Groupcast Master can be really good on Bishop as well, because it suddenly turns that 40% Benediction into 100%. So even if you sort of want to use Bishop long term, it can still be worth leveling White Mage to get that Groupcast Master. Circle of Life is less useful. It can be nice if you want to sort of get that one-time revive on everyone, but I tend to find there's usually better options that late in the game. So yeah, the main places White Magic is really good. So Curaga is very good at a few things. I mentioned it's better healing than Benediction for a bit of time. It's also available slightly earlier in terms of job level, although you need to get to Grandship first, which is later in the game, story-wise. So it's sort of a trade-off there in terms of which comes first. But it is also worth noting that you don't necessarily need to use a staff when you're using a White Mage, and I did mention that a minute ago as well. And the reason is there's lots of other ways of boosting your mind. When you get Curaga, you can buy the Dalmatica from Grandship, which is 20 mind, and you'll also have the Force Armets, which are another 10 mind. And put those together, and you can have like 75 mind about the point hitting Grandship. Earlier in the game, the lower White Magic spells can be quite useful. I tend to find they're slightly better than Vivify for a while, but once you get Benediction, they're sort of outclassed completely. The downside to them is their MP cost is a lot higher than Bishop, so you need to have a way of managing the MP. And the best way of managing MP generally comes from Bishop. So yeah, that is a bit of a flaw for White Mage. It can be quite hard to manage. However, its healing can be really effective. It has access to a few good offensive options. So overall, it does pretty well, and it's ended up at 16th on this list. Rank 15, first in the top half of the list, is Dark Knight. Dark Knight offers some of the best physical group attacks in the game between Blackbane and Dark Nebula. These have 1.5 times and 4 times damage respectively to all enemies, which is kind of ridiculous. Unfortunately, Dark Nebula has a pretty harsh drawback. Blackbane has a bit of a drawback, but it's not as bad. So they do require a little bit of care to use well. In terms of stats, Dark Knight is pretty good. It's got a small agility bonus. It's got good strength. Its durability is not that great actually. It's got below average mind, only slightly above average HP, which is nothing too special. It does have S rank helms and A rank in other armors, which is alright. The place it really shines is its weapon ranks. S rank katanas is probably the best S rank to have, and on top of that, it's also got A rank spears. Now, considering it's a group attack job, this is really fantastic because if you have, say, dual wield plus triple wield, you can have 2 katanas and a spear equipped, have good offense from every hand, a 39% crit rate, and a 25% attack bonus when using group attacks such as Blackbane. Altogether, this is a really, really nice combination. It gets even better when you add in that adversity as the specialty, and the Dark Knight job command constantly triggers that, giving you consistent stat boosts as you go. So adversity is a 10% boost to attack and defense stats, magic and physical, every time you take at least 20% of your max HP and damage. And since most of Dark Knight's abilities trigger that, by doing that much damage to yourself, you're constantly getting these bonuses, and they effectively last forever, maxing out your stats, provided you don't die. So the Dark Knight attacks all cost, well, mostly cost HP. Darkbane costs 20%, Blackbane and Dark Nebula are 30%. Rage costs 20% each time it activates, which is up to 5. So it's important to have some way of managing that. The most common is to set up a Benediction wall or other healing wall on the enemies, as that way each time you attack with most of these abilities you fully heal. And that way sort of the HP cost becomes irrelevant, and in fact it deals with most of your healing needs anyway. With that, you sort of getting these very powerful attacks for basically no cost, and that's a huge bonus. Rage is an interesting one in there. In default, that was notorious as easily the best move in the game, and although it sort of didn't change here, a lot of indirect changes have nerfed it heavily. It doesn't trigger healing effects, such as walls, when it lands anymore. And that means you sort of have to then minus strike afterwards to fully heal yourself on the wall, or otherwise do something else to heal afterwards. So it's still good, but it's no longer nearly as good as it once was. Dark Knight has a lot of good abilities. Pretty much everything here does something useful. So Absorb Magic can be good if you know enemies are likely to use magic. Life or Death is very nice if you have Doom immunity, such as from Astrologian, or if you just don't care about being doomed in 5 turns, for example, you're going to win before that. And its support abilities are all at least somewhat useful. Adversity is definitely the best, especially if you want to use Dark Knight as a job command on another job. But even if you aren't using Dark Knight, Adversity is still nice to fill a job command. Blaze of Glory can be very nice for dealing massive damage when you do get KO'd, often guaranteed 10Ks. Blind Immunity, it's an immunity. It can be nice, but it's not the best. But yeah, Dark Knight does a lot of good things. I could probably sit here and speak for several more minutes about combos you can do with, such as Dark Nebula and Black Bane or Funeral Pyre, but I think we get the idea. One of the notable weaknesses of Dark Knight are firstly that it comes quite late in the game, and as with all the other jobs that come late, this is a bit of an issue because you just don't get the job for long enough for it to be that amazing. It also takes a little bit of time before you start getting to those really good abilities, like Dark Nebula is level 8, Black Bane's level 6. And while the sports abilities, particularly Adversity, can be good, it's not amazing, so it's not great in terms of support abilities, which is a little bit annoying as well. But aside from that, everything Dark Knight does, it does pretty well. It's a very, very good physical job, has some of the best job commands for physical damage in the game, and that's why it's managed to get to rank 15. Rank 14 is Guardian, and Guardian is probably one of the most difficult jobs to talk about because it does so many different things. Let's start by looking at its stats. They are extremely imbalanced towards defense. It has the best HP in the game, the best mind in the game, and the joint best vitality in the game. On top of that, it has S rank in all 3 armor types, which is kind of insane. However, the trade-off here is it's pretty terrible in every other stat except for strength, with the worst agility, dexterity, MP, and intelligence in the game. Its strength might look quite good, but because of its agility being so low, its hit rate is always pretty bad. So don't expect a Guardian to ever deal too much damage. It does have S rank spears, and that can be nice for group attacks for the 25% bonus, but it's nothing too special in Guardian's case. Okay, so the job command here does sort of 3 different things, and they're all sort of not that linked, so it's a very kind of confusing job at first. Okay, so the first thing that Guardian offers is Possession. This lets you possess either an ally or an enemy, adding your attack stats, MP, and HP to theirs. However, of course, the Guardian is then KO'd until possession ends. If you use it against enemies, they have a chance of resisting, and bosses it never works against, but sort of additional enemies with bosses you can often possess. This can be really effective. Possessing an enemy, for example, takes one enemy out of the battle, and it lasts for 6 turns, so as long as you time it correctly, you can, on their final turn, attack with them 3 times and then unpossess. On top of that, enemies tend to have very high attack stats already, so when you're using that against the enemy, you can often deal massive damage to them, which is obviously really useful. Another advantage of this is often if you say possess one enemy, KO the rest of their additional enemies, as long as that one possessed enemy is still alive, the boss will not try and summon extra enemies a lot of the time. So this lets you effectively just completely destroy any additional enemies they had, and makes a lot of battles much easier. Of course, this only works against bosses that do summon additional enemies, or that have additional enemies to begin with. So it doesn't work against, for example, the Chapter 5 story Asterix battles. But it works against a lot of the side quest ones. Possessing allies is, I'd say, less useful in general, because it's just stat boosting, but it can still be very useful for hitting very hard. The second thing going on here is the Guardian Spirit Soul Power attacks. A notable thing about these is they have a base power of 50, and what that basically means is it's like adding 50 attack to your damage. And if you're dual wielding or wielding at least 2 weapons, it's 50 attack to each weapon. So this can actually make Soul Smash, Soul Blaster, and Soul Cannon very powerful, especially when combined with their 1.5 times multiplier. They're still not usually going to hit that hard if you're a Guardian, but if you're using the Guardian Job command and then the job, these can be a really good ways of doing massive damage. Soul Blaster can easily be hitting for 10Ks, provided you can build up that soul power. There's also, of course, Soul Link here to help build that up. If you Soul Link someone, you can actually use Soul Mastery stuff without having to use Guardian Spirit. But if you're using those abilities, the main thing, you probably want to use Guardian Spirit anyway. You can also just use Soul Boost to get like basically a free Soul Blaster at the start of random encounters. This is really effective actually, it just often takes out random encounters in 1 or 2 hits. So that's another thing you can do. The final main thing Guardian provides is Soul Mirror. This is a massively powerful ability. It affects all physical attacks for 3 turns. A lot of enemies only use physical attacks, so if you can, say, put a Soul Mirror up on someone and then force them to attack the person with it, such as by using Provoke or Decorate or Kairai, you can just basically tank them out really easily and deal massive damage back to them. It does only last 3 turns and it costs a lot of MP, which can be an issue, but provided you have a way of managing that, it's a very effective ability. So yeah, the Guardian Job command does a lot of really good stuff. There's a lot of sort of fun combos you can do here. Talked about possessing enemies. If you're possessing allies, you can also use Twin Souls later in the game. I'd say this probably isn't worth a slot if you're doing that, but having access to 4 job commands at once can be quite funny. Soul Mirror is really effective for tanking a lot of the time. Just sort of set it up, get only the people that have Soul Mirrors be attacked, or just put Soul Mirrors on everyone, and suddenly like you're basically invincible to anything that isn't magic. It's very useful. And also Guardian's main stats are just incredible for tanking, especially late in the game. Guardian's pretty notable for being fantastic against sort of the super boss and just sort of late game tanking in a ghost setup, because it has such good stats you just stand there and take no damage. Even better if you could set up the Soul Mirror as well. So yeah, Guardian, very very good for tanking. It has some fun stuff it can do against bosses, fun stuff it can do against random encounters. Really the only major downsides here are, firstly obviously it's being so slow, and secondly it comes very late in the game. You get it towards the end of chapter 4, so there's not a huge amount of game left after you get it, but for the time it is around, it is a very powerful and very useful job. Okay, rank 13 is Charioteer. When I was making the picture you're seeing now for this one, I was half tempted to just cross out every ability that isn't Trample, Physical Attack 20% up, Triple Wield and Quad Wield, because really they're the 4 that matter here. Charioteer is not very good in lots of ways, but it provides 4 things that are incredible, and really that's all it needs to do to get this high. So in terms of its main stats, it's not really that great. It's not terrible. It's got good strength, it's got good HP, but agility is mediocre. The weapon ranks really are what holds it back. C rank and everything is terrible. It doesn't have a single weapon it can use well, and it has to rely on Born Warrior to get its weapon ranks up. Now you might think at first, oh that means it can use basically S rank in anything, and it kind of can, but because it takes at least 1 and often more basic attacks to get to that S rank, it's slow to set up, and that's kind of annoying. Also, while we're talking about Born Warrior, you might have noticed when you do hit the max rank, it says maximum arms and armor proficiency. Then you might be thinking, does it actually boost your armor rank? The answer is no, sadly. It's probably cut out during development for some reason, and it's kind of a shame because if it did have that, I think the ability would almost be worth using. But as it is, Warmori is just pretty bad all around. In terms of job commands, Trample is obviously the really big one, as I mentioned that before. If you're at full health, Trample is 1.5 times damage for no cost, and that's pretty fantastic. As a Charioteer, it's not that amazing because Charioteer isn't that fast, but in a job such as, say, Thief or Ninja, this is just basically free 1.5 times damage, which is huge. Weapon Toss and Wild Toss and Retrieve Weapon, they're interesting, but they are not usually very good. So the damage they deal is 7 times the weapon's attack times your hit count. So again, these aren't that good as a Charioteer because of low agility, but in a job such as, say, Thief or Ninja, they can start doing quite fun things because they hit actually quite hard. They also pierce defense, so you can sort of do a sort of silly setup where you say dual wield shields and then just weapon toss at the enemy. But the damage is really not high enough, and you need a lot of good weapons to actually make use of it. Master at Arms is kind of useful. It's sort of instant S rank in a weapon, or up to 3 weapons. Actually up to 4 weapons if you're quad wielding. But again, that's a turn of setting up, so it's not the best thing. The final one here is Wanton Destruction, and that's actually a bit underrated. I don't really see people ever talking about Wanton Destruction being a good ability, but it's a 1 BP cost, so 2 BP in total, to deal a total of 4 times damage spread among all enemies. That's actually very good damage-wise. The fact it's random is a bit annoying, but overall it's a really strong attack. It does come a little bit late, which is annoying as well, but I've used it in the past and I've been quite impressed by it. So they're sort of the main job commands here, but the bits that really make Charioteer good are, as I say, the wielding abilities and physical attack 20% up. So physical attack 20% up doesn't sound like it's that amazing, but it actually turns out to be really good. So 1 slot for 20% extra damage is already pretty good, but the thing to bear in mind is this boosts your physical attack before defense is factored in. And as a result, you're usually getting more like 25% increased damage from this. And for 1 slot, especially one that comes so early in the game, that's pretty amazing. Physical attack 20% up is an ability you'll probably be using throughout the entire game on physical attackers, and you're getting it right at the start from Charioteer. It makes a very big difference. Triple wield and quad wield, I could definitely talk for another several minutes about. I think we all know that they're really good abilities. I would say triple wield is the more valuable of the two in general, and one part of that is that it comes a lot earlier. You can get triple wield before the end of the prologue, whereas quad wield you're probably not getting until near the end of the game. But also the cost of triple wield is much lower. It's only 1 slot instead of 2, but importantly, losing your head slot is a lot less damaging than losing your armor slot. With triple wield, there's a few nice things you can do, one of which is equip a weapon in your right hand, a shield in your left hand, and then another weapon on your head. As long as you don't have a weapon in your left hand, your right hand weapon doesn't lose power. So if you do this, you get a full power right hand weapon, a half power head weapon, and the defense of a shield. And overall, this is a really nice combination of good defense and good offense. As you get later into the game, you get, say, dual wield. You might want to just go 3 weapons, all at full power, and that's a pretty fantastic setup as well. You sacrifice a little bit of the defense from your head weapon to get 50% extra attack, and that's almost always worthwhile on the physical attacker. Quad wield, you also sacrifice the body slot to get a further 33% over triple wield, which is still good, but at that point you often need a setup in terms of your defenses to not die. That could be things like Utsusemi, Undo Action, Karai, whatever. But yeah, these are all really good abilities. And the nice thing I would say about Charioteer is it can be an incredibly valuable job when you just level it up to level 3 and then never touch it again. That sounds like a weird thing to say about a job that I've put in the top half, but really the reason Charioteer is so high is that those first 3 abilities, those first 3 levels are so good. The rest of them takes a while until you get to Wanton Destruction, so when they get good again. But yeah, those first abilities are so good. Charioteer has got itself into the top half based on them alone. Okay, so that's it for the mid tier. I'd say all of these jobs are ones that I use pretty much every playthrough, at least in some fashion. But going up from here, they're getting to the jobs that are really great and have some really powerful abilities you can use. So hope you enjoyed this part, and hope you enjoy the next one, which will be the upper mid tier.